All right, so here we go. Today on the Tom Kelly Show, my third or fourth cousin, not even biologically, but emotionally, Hugh Ryan is here. He wrote the book, The Women's House of Detention, and the one that I'm reading right now and rereading right now, When Brooklyn Was Queer, which is a history of all things queer and gay in Brooklyn. I know, my mother there were gay people in Brooklyn before 2012. Yes. So what do you say? You sit back and we start the show.
The Tom Kelly Show. Everybody, I want you to go to the Tom Kelly Show. I want you all to know about the Tom Kelly Show.
And here we go, and content warning, spoiler alert. Yes, Brooklyn was indeed queer. You are experiencing the Tom Kelly Show, and I'm actually, so the gimmick of the show, if you're new to the Tom Kelly podcast, here is it. I'm a man getting back to having fun. I'm tired of whining about things going on in my life, and I'm just trying to get back to little things that amuse me. And one of those things is connecting with people that you love that you don't see in your life. And our guest today, author Hugh Ryan, for the sake of simplicity, he is like my third cousin. If we treated it, yeah, he could be, but he's not. He's not a biological relative, but he's on the Irish side of my family. And without getting too into it, my grandma was friends with his grandma and great aunt. No, and aunt.
And aunt.
Yes. Great aunt. No, great. I am right. Great aunt. Aunt Jenny Carey would be your great aunt.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, Jenny, not my. Yes.
Yes, and then we have a common aunt. Well, you don't.
Cousin.
Do you call? Well, for you it's a cousin. My Aunt Anne, who is my dad's cousin. So my ceremonial aunt is really, when I'm joking, she's the only Irish relative we're talking to. But we have a great relationship with a lot of people. But she's my single aunt, who went out of her way to really cultivate, one, my connection with my Irish history, and two, my creative sides. She's always been encouraging in the artist side of me, and I think she was important in your life growing up big time, right?
Oh, absolutely. She was the first person who taught me that you could travel on your own, that you could just say, you know what, I want to go to Australia, so I'm going to go to Australia.
Really?
Yeah. It's inspiring.
She tried to inspire me with that. I didn't quite get that ballsy. But why does Hugh matter to you? He wrote this book, When Brooklyn Was Queer. We're going to talk a lot about that in a second. He talked about the book, The Women's House of Detention. What's that? Women's prisons in the 1920s?
Prison in Greenwich Village.
Village. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the word Anne Carey used for you. And this has got to be 12 years ago. When did you start this book?
Oh, God, when did I start that book? Probably 2012.
Okay, so right around then, Anne used the phrase, so you were openly gay before it was cool to be openly gay. Your family was accepting before it was cool to be openly accepting. My joke about your family is they have 3 sons, and they're very disappointed one of them is straight. And then actually, a funny one about going to one of your parties, the family was so liberal, I said I was voting for Obama over Hillary. And I had one of your uncles chewed me out as if I said I was voting for Trump over Hillary, and I want to grab you all by the P word.
Oh, well, there was, between my mother and father, they were firmly, my dad was very Obama, my mom was very Hillary.
Where was your dad when I needed someone to bail me out at this party?
Quietly in another room, as always. That man is no fool.
You know what? And that does sum up my impression of your pop. It really does. And then, so Anne used the phrase, queer historian.
Yes.
And I remember saying, Anne, you're not allowed to say queer. No, and you were using the word queer again as the queer community was taking it back. Is that a fair way to describe yourself?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, for me, the thing I always say is this. Because I'm a historian, I talk to a lot of people, some of whom are way older than me, some of whom are way younger than me. I don't care about what word in particular somebody wants to use, so long as you're not being an asshole about it. Like, for me, it's all about intent more than the specific language, I use queer because I think of it as like a big, broad umbrella. It's like everybody who's like sexually different in some way, or gender, it's not specific. It's a big community. I like that. And when in my history is that, I can't be all the things under the umbrella, but I can write a history that has all of those pieces.
So yeah, and this is what I love about everything. So I'm hoping Hugh will be your queer friend. No, listen, I grew I grew up probably in a much more conservative, work working class, white, religious environment than you. Not just even my own family, but the geographic area I was in. I don't think I had a gay friend until college. I don't think I
had never met an out gay person until I got to college. Until after I was out, I'd never met an out gay person.
Were you out in high school?
Yeah, but not broadly. You know, it was the mid-90s. It was like some people knew, some people didn't. There were like 3 teachers that we all talked about who did, in fact, all turn out to be gay later, but nobody knew for sure.
Right. Actually, did your family know? Like when we...
Yeah, I came out to them my senior year of high school, which was rough. We had a kind of a rough couple of years.
That's 90, because that's about 96. You're 2 years younger than me?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was hard. It was definitely a bit of a surprise for them, which then was a surprise for me. Oh, okay. They'll tell you now that they were not surprised. They were surprised. Or at least they acted very convincingly surprised. But yeah, we had, nobody kind of talked about it back then. Nobody knew about it. There wasn't a lot of TV shows. There wasn't a lot, our family is like working class Irish Catholics who really believed that like the only way you survived in this world was by having kids who were then going to take care of you. And so their immediate thought, I can remember my mother saying, it's the lonely life. That was their worry, was that I would be alone forever. And to them, they just couldn't imagine. No,
and that's a beautiful sentiment. And that's I think that's a beautiful and loving sentiment. How did that make you feel?
It was hard because it felt a little bit like they were imagining things that were not actually my circumstance. Like, I would have much rather them talk to me about how I felt in the moment coming out to them than this imagined that in 30 years I would be a failure. Do you know? Like, that I understood that they were going there because they were worried about me. And because they lived in a world that told them that that's what happened to gay people. And so you didn't want to be gay because those terrible things would happen. And, our aunts are not people to keep their opinions to themselves. And back then, I was told maybe I should go into the priesthood. I was told, I should get a girl pregnant and then just, take the baby. Like, all of the craziest things you can possibly imagine.
Because it's funny, I'm very tight with one common aunt, and then I guess less so with your mom, and then after that it's all legend. And Eileen, the ones I know struck me as very accepting or doing their...
They were. For the time period they were, and they've become even more. They've become so wonderful. But, it was a process, and part of that process was us fighting a lot about it. And in a good way. I mean, we had to get through it. It took a number of years, and it was rough, but I also think it made us, like, adults together. I think until you've had, like, a real fight with your parents, like a real genuine one where you've both been jerks, and you've both been sort of right and both been sort of wrong, and then you have to talk about it afterwards and admit that you were a jerk, but also the other person was a jerk, and everyone has to say they're sorry. Until that has happened, you can't have an adult relationship.
So I guess, I'm going to be honest, I am first or second generation Irish and Italian. I have never heard the words "I'm sorry" in my life. I know I've said it. But I have never heard it from anybody else.
You've got to fight them to the ground with those kind of parents.
Oh, I'm not an adult. But I think your book also, too, what's funny, I think your life is the happy ending to this book. Because honestly, even I've owned this book for 5 years. I only just started reading it last night on Audible in traffic. I'm 3 hours in. And
I'm sorry about the traffic.
It made it fun because you buy the book because it's beautiful. You can touch it. It has a great cover. It's actually in the bookstores again.
Yeah, we're still out there.
Is it still out there, or is it just I'm noticing?
Never gone out of print.
Okay. Yeah. They're placing it more prominently at the Strand.
Yes.
And I guess my question, like, I think the way this book is about what I think your mom was even afraid of, that sad, lonely life you could live if you were different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a lot of it is looking at what lives for all kinds of queer people were like 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 150 years ago, and finding all of this community and these lives that are much more interesting than might assume. Things that we don't expect to have happening 100 years ago were happening. All the same exact things that happen now happened then. They look different, and people thought about them differently, But that was the great thing about doing this research. Because when I started to write this book, I knew nothing. And no one I knew anything either. That's what prompted me to write it, is that everybody I asked was like, I don't know anything about the queer history of Brooklyn. And I was like, I'm from New York. I've lived in Brooklyn at that point for like 12 years, and I also know nothing about this. And so how could I expect in 1996 my parents to have known anything about this,
Yeah, well, and I guess what I saw, and the book starts in what year again? 18?
I think I start in 1855.
And what I got out of 1855 was 1855 in this book for me growing up in Marine Park, Brooklyn, and then out in Massapequa, Long Island, frankly, 1855 felt like 2015 on Long Island. Like the joke we've had on the podcast before is the best way back to the year 1983 is straight down the Long Island Expressway. But yeah, I don't think you saw geographically commonly gay people in Nassau County. I think I'm only just starting to hear about it now.
I mean, the 19th century in America was really different from now. 1855 was the first time Brooklyn was a boomtown. The first time where Brooklyn was like, no, we're a major city. We're not just New York's little shadow, you know? They had Walt Whitman, this major poet, writing in 1855. They were getting all this
And was he gay or not gay? Not gay.
Super
Very gay.
Super gay.
Okay.
I mean, he wouldn't have said it that way, but yes. Yeah. In fact, we've even found drafts of his poems where he changed male pronouns to female pronouns to make them more acceptable and everything. And
really?
Yeah. He kept a diary. It's like 15 pages of just one-line notes of every man that he met, including ones that say things like, slept with me. So it's pretty clear in some senses.
So I think this is the first thing that I think is interesting. And I'll ask you all the dumb things about, what's it like being gay and no trouble later. But gay people seem to move to neighborhoods. And Walt Whitman was the start of that.
He was one of them. He moved to the waterfront in Brooklyn where there was all of this, because it's becoming a city, right? All of this activity, all of these single people moving there for different reasons, right? And if you were a man in the 19th century, you're expected to spend all your time with men. And if you were a woman, you were expected to spend all your time with women. This idea of like cross-sex socializing that we have, it just wasn't a thing. And so he was living in neighborhoods that were full of men who, for one reason or another, had left their hometowns, often because they didn't fit in certain ways, or because they had to because they didn't have the money, and they're coming from all different countries. So it's this place where it's all men hanging out together. There's probably almost no women of a marriable age of your community around you. You're living in rooms with 6 other guys. It just was a world in which men had a lot of intimacy with men. Women were these weirdos, these things on this other side of a great divide. They were nothing. You know, do you remember that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? That was very much what the Victorians believed. They were so separate. You could never have a real friendship across sex, right? Your most intense relationships were meant to be with other men or with other women. And so many times,
and then and the woman was just back at the house making babies.
Or you would have an intense relationship with your wife once you were married, but before that point, no, you just had different lives. And so a lot of these guys, they probably didn't think about themselves the way we think about ourselves today, right? Heterosexuality hadn't been defined. When that got defined, the end of the 19th century, it was as a morbid obsession with the opposite sex. They just were not living lives like we lived them. And so Walt Whitman's down on the waterfront looking at these guys, hooking up with them, writing poetry about them, trying to imagine what we think of as being gay. He, in fact, writes poems that invent words for this very concept, because at that time, the only concept out there wasn't about sex. It was about your body. If you were queer, it was because your body was more woman than man, or more man than woman. And he is really trying to imagine, what would it mean to be a man who was masculine, manly, like a man, but also attracted to men. So much of his poetry is trying to come up with words for this because it just wasn't a common experience yet. We didn't have ways to think about that. So Brooklyn in the mid-19th century is where all this exciting stuff is happening. It's a new city. They're inventing new ideas for gayness, new poetry. He's also like the first poet in America to write in free verse and to let go of like sonnets and all of that like really heavy, boring, rhyming poetry that no one cares about. You know, all this new stuff is happening in Brooklyn in the mid-1800s.
So what I loved about your book is, one, I am a well-trained wannabe ally in the year 2023. Right. 24 now.
24,
even.
okay.
Yeah, I gave it up in 24. I was great in 23. But there's a lot of like even you using the word queer. I worked it out of my system. And then now we're working. I still cringe when I say it. What I found, I've learned to let go of the stereotype of, if you're in show business, you must be gay. Your book actually sort of seems like the waterfront was gay because it wasn't policed, was a sentence that struck me.
Yeah.
And then Coney Island, where there was vaudeville, there was a lot of gay, not just gay.
Everything.
I'm using the word gay, but the everythings that I'm only even just learning about in the year 2024, that there was androgynous people, there were transgendered people.
Drag kings in the 19th century that were hugely popular.
Okay, now drag king. Tell them what a drag king is.
Like a drag queen, but the opposite,
See,
right?
is that a thing now?
It is, but not as much as it was in 1890. In 1890, drag kings were so famous that the drag king who was like the top king, who was based in New York City and lived in Brooklyn for a while, a woman named Ella Wesner, was hired by champagne companies to like pass out her champagne at her shows. When they first invented cigarette boxes, you know, like little cigarette cartons, like we get them today,
right?
They were this new thing in the late 1800s. And so like baseball cards put gum in to dispense them, the cigarettes put cards of famous entertainers in. And she was like the number one. She was in Little Beauty cigarettes. She was the face of Little Beauty cigarettes in men's drag, a little fez hat. And I mean, these people were stars in America.
Okay. Now, you are a writer who has been published in Rolling Stone, right? No. I know the Times, Vice.
Times, Vice.
Okay, I confuse Vice and the Stone.
Nation.
No, but you're a brilliant writer. What made you pick up this queer historian thing? Like, I'm trying to find the right way to say. Like, I find what made this book important, and I have a lot of friends who are different levels of gay. A lot of closeted friends or boring gay friends. I've always identified with outsiders, and that turns out to be a lot of gay friends. For me, what I like about this book is it's a fun history book. And I think the difference between history and anecdote is whether or not someone takes the time to go research, write it down, and put it on a piece of paper, and suddenly that old legend is history. What made you give up years of your life, and you told me how much money you've made on this, which is pennies, people.
It really
pennies.
is.
What would make you give up blank amount of time of your life to do the painstaking what would make you do the painstaking research? Because there's also someone else, you had a researcher, an archivist on this?
Yeah.
So that's now two people on a book that made $1.
Yes, and we were driving, like, at some points, you know, to Connecticut and to Maine and to D.C. to find different archives and things like that. It's two things. The first is just curiosity. Like everybody else, I didn't know any of this, and I have an investment, you know, in knowing it, because it is a personal history in a way. You know, it's stuff that I never learned about and was always told didn't exist. So there's that level of just like, I'm curious and I want to know. But also, and this is the real nerdy part of me, like, I'm really interested in who we are today. I'm not super interested in history, to be honest. I'm interested in how we got to be this.
For a guy who's written 2 history books.
I know. That's the weird thing. But I want to understand why we are who we are right now. And the only way to understand that is to look at who we were and to see kind of like how we evolve year by year by year into being who we are now. But that's really boring, to be honest. I love it. And I will read really boring academic history, but nobody wants to read this kind of like theoretical. You got to have people, bodies, movement, sex, romance, violence, all the things of fiction, you know? And so that kind of like purely intellectual, how did we become who we are today, needs to be spoken through people and things that we care about that are interesting and fun and given flesh and form and body. And that's why I do the research, is like, I love that stuff. I think it's super interesting. And through that, I can talk about like, how did the queer community develop? How did we go from a world in which nobody used the word gay and the word gay didn't even exist to today where, what is it? I think the new Gallup poll said 21% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ, right? How do these changes happen? That's really what my books are about. And the people in them, the stories and all of that are just ways to help us see it and feel it.
Now pause, don't say a damn word. I'm making sure this doesn't fall. Of course the thing falls off during a beautiful answer. Pause. All right. Because I am going to... Fucking hang.
Oh, Jesus.
No, we're at 5 minutes. Just hang on. I need to just man up a bit. And there we go.
Got it?
All right. So what I found great about your book is I think for the casual, heteronormative person, we think there's no gay history pre-Stonewall. Yeah. Is that a fair stereotype?
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of gay people think that, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that they just have no idea, no access to it, you know?
Okay. Are there other queer history books?
Yes, there are some really great ones, and particularly about New York. New York has so much history. My book, absolutely would not exist without this book called Gay New York, which was published in the 90s. And it's mostly about Manhattan, and it's mostly about gay men, and it only goes up to World War II. So it's very different from my book. But he lays a lot of this kind of groundwork, There's another woman named Lillian Faderman, a woman named Sadia Hartman. These are people who've been doing this work for 30 years at this point. But for the most part, their books are published through universities. They're academic. They're really great.
No, this is a fun read. Yeah,
that's
this is fun.
I want to be emotional. I want you to enjoy it.
You used a joke that I thought I had come up with early on in the book, where my stereotype of your book when Brooklyn was queer was, all right, it's going to be gay Grease. And you did your own version of that joke in there. Yeah, oh my God. But even my mother said this was, there were no gay people in Brooklyn before Williamsburg. And she did, and by the way, my mother does not sound like that and did not say that exact sentence, but that was the sentiment she conveyed was, and you're right, my stereotype of Brooklyn is John Gotti, the Gambinos,
the Greasers.
Greasers.
The Italians, as our family might call them.
Yes. And remember, just a stupid one, when my dad married my mom, who's Italian, that was a mixed marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a big thing when Anne Eileen married her husband, who was Italian.
Okay. See, I didn't know her that chunk of her life. Eileen married an Ital.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Mixed marriage. But it's funny. I grew up the same way, not knowing anything Brooklyn history, not knowing anything about gay people there. When I wrote this book, Kathy's husband, our cousin Kathy's husband, Jerry.
Barron's.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know Jerry.
Yeah.
So Jerry says to me, his dad grew up in downtown Brooklyn. And he said, growing up, my dad told me this one totally random story. When they were kids, it was commonly known among the kids in his neighborhood that gay people had super strength. This is the 30s. He was like, I don't know anything else. I don't know where my father came up with that, how commonly known it was, where this super strength was supposed to nothing. But that was, so there are these weird little stories and places that get passed around, little anecdotes,
Yeah, so back to fun gay stereotypes. I wonder if that was a way to keep kids away from gay people. Like one thing that I love about the book, and I think I'm going to slowly now make you Hugh Ryan, America's Queer Friend.
I'm down.
Okay. Is for people who didn't have a gay friend or anybody in their life, being gay was tied to pedophilia. Mm-hmm. Do you think stupid stories like that were meant to scare kids away?
No, that stereotype, it really comes about in the 70s. We don't really have that connection between gay men and pedophilia so much until then. It is starting in the mid 1940s and 50s, but it's not really a thing yet at that point. In the 30s, what they were really trying to think about, which is such a 19th century idea, but they were really trying to figure out, was gayness in your mind? Or was your body actually different? Were you physically a different kind of person? And so there are a lot of these bodily rumors about gay people at that time.
And that's about where I am in the book right now with hang on, I want to get the terms right, because my big fear of doing this interview is I'm going to say the wrong damn thing 20 years from now. I'm going to get Shane Gillis. You were not bi-gendered. I'm at the chapter of a book where there's a person being studied who says they are two genders.
Yes. That's the...
And what word am I missing?
Androgyne is the word she uses. Jenny June was her name.
Okay.
And she lived in New York in the 1890s. She wrote 3 memoirs, couldn't get them published until the 1920s. And she very much says, I have a female brain in a female body that just happens to look male. That's the line she is.
And that
working.
person was submitting to medical examinations.
Not even just submitting. She was actively trying to get doctors to come and verify the things she was saying. Because much like today, if you're trans, you often have to have medical approval for people to believe you. And so she was really looking to publish this book to get medical scholars to think about her, to talk to her, to listen to her.
Okay. And now here's where I'm going to start asking dumb questions or strong views. I have friends, if it's LGBTQIA plus and 5 more letters, I have friends in the L and the G section who don't love being lumped in with the extra letters because they feel other people's experiences may cheapen theirs. So first question on that part of the book, should we be doing studies, physical studies of gay people? Because it sounds like in 1980, God, that sounds smart. Let's study a gay. Like you just took me on both sides of my opinion in that last sentence there, where I'm like, we don't need to do scientific studies on gay people. Gay people are gay. But then you're like, well, what about bi people? What about fluid people? And then you just hit the big one is trans people because we are prescribing drugs.
I mean,
but going back, should I be treating you like a fucking science experiment? You know?
I think we jump back 100 years. What we see is that these categories that we think are so developed really are not very developed back then. They're trying to figure them out. And they're trying to figure out what does it mean to have a body, right? Psychology doesn't even exist yet. Freud isn't here to tell us your personality's in your head. In the 1800s, they thought everything was in your body. If you had thin lips, that meant you were a liar. Right? Like they saw your personality as directly attached to your body. So there was no idea of a homosexuality like your friends that you're talking about today can imagine, where they're like, oh, we're not part of that. Yeah. Back then, if you were attracted to other men, that was part of gender, and it was also part of your body. Walt Whitman, like I mentioned, he's trying to come up with words in the 1850s for what it means to be gay. He still uses words that are about the physical body. He still thinks gay people have physically different bodies. He just doesn't think they're gendered like women. Right? But he still thinks gay people are different in their body. That's the belief we have.
Right. There's no x-rays, I guess. There's no biology books yet.
And even the biology that is, I mean, come on. Biology is like a pretty weak science, to be honest. If you look at any one person, you can point out things about, like, I am slightly below the average height for men in America. If you wanted to say that my body was different and more like a woman's, there's one way, right? So is my waist to shoulder ratio. So there we go. That's two ways in which my body is more like a woman. If you look at enough people, you can find what you want to see. So these studies that she's doing back then are really just trying to get someone to say, like, you are valid as a person and your experiences are real. But she has to kind of submit to these certain rules around them. And we don't really come up with this idea that, like, there is a gayness that is separated from gender. It's not a widely believed thing until like the 40s, right? So your friends live in a world that like I said before, I want to see how we get to this idea, right?
Yeah.
That idea is only possible because all of these trans people and these otherly gendered people in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, 1920s said, study us. We are one giant community. We are connected. So those folks have kind of taken this thing where, like, 100 years ago, all of these broadly queer people said, no. Being attracted to someone, that's a special part of gender. That's different. You can do that part of gender and have it not say anything about gender, right? We had to make that decision. That was a choice we made.
Okay. So we're up to 2 letters, L and G. My L and G's get mad at the B's. Because, like, listen, in the 1990s, it was, I'm gay, I can't change it, you have to deal with it. Sexuality is not a choice.
That is one of my least favorite arguments.
Well, it was good to get you in the neighborhood.
It was, but I just don't believe that because I can't change is the reason I should have rights. Like, I think I should have rights because I should be allowed to do what I want.
So I always loved the guy from Big Bang Theory is the man who broadened out. And I got in trouble for using this sentence at some point with Human Resources in 2018. Who's the guy who played Penny's boyfriend? The other one. The guy. Okay, but the guy who's not Jim Parsons, who's the lead, who was on Roseanne.
Okay. He
had a line, well, what if being gay was a choice? Is that a bad thing? And I just love the way he was quoted on that. Yeah. But I have gay friends who are like, I don't want to hear about your bisexual girl. Like, for women our age, it's cheap. Like, I have girls who are you really bi or were you experimenting? I think they were really bi and experimenting, but it seemed almost like I'm carrying a purse gay. Is that a fair sentence?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Now, do certain experiences, like the word queer, if I call a gay man queer, am I hurting his feelings?
Depends on the man. Like, that's what, all the time, I think every bit of language depends on the person you're talking to. There's no one word that everybody likes. But the thing I think about a lot with that, what you're just saying about bisexuality, it's like, we get really hung up, and I think this is because of the fucking Victorians who defined everything.
Yeah.
That they were really interested in who is not queer in any way whatsoever. They wanted to define the perfect person. They're really the whole reason they were doing sexology is that they wanted to like breed the right kind of people. It's a very like weird and creepy idea in the 19th century. And so they wanted to find that person who is always perfectly like straight and manly or straight and womanly. And so time mattered a lot to them. If you were sexually attracted to people for a certain period of time, well, that meant you were constantly out of the group. And so we've grown up with this idea that you have to be one thing always. And if you come out as bisexual now, but you come out as gay 20 years later, then you go back and revise and say, well, I was really making it up all that time. And for some people, that might be true. But I think there are a lot of us for whom things change. Like, I just don't think sexuality is absolutely always set. For some people, it is. Okay. Absolutely. But I also don't care, because at the end of the day, I don't care if your sexual orientation is always one thing, but in college it was different, or if it was different every single day. It's still your right to do those things.
Did you always feel that way? For a guy who was, no, but for real, for a guy who came out before it was cool, even to, let's go to your experience in 1996.
In the late 20th century.
Yeah, but I'm sure somebody had to use the phrase with you, oh, it's just a phase.
Oh, all the time. All the time. And I would get very angry about it and say, sure.
Yeah.
And so? I think people have this idea.
That didn't, but for real, that's who you are. And it would make you angry, but it also doesn't bother you that it could have been a phase for someone else.
That's fine.
Okay.
I just think that everybody kind of gets to do their own thing. And so long as you don't hurt someone else. I also have a ton of piercings. I have a ton of tattoos. I've done lots of things with my body.
But they hurt me, by the way. Other people's tattoos do hurt me. No, just in a way of imagining the physical pain of getting it.
Oh, I just thought you meant some are really bad, which I also agree with.
No, I haven't looked at your art, and I'm not judging. You're very well covered.
I just think, this is one of those places where queer rights and pro-choice healthcare access, it's your body. It's your body. Do what you want with it. I have no right to say anything about your body.
Well, my overall line, or I'll go back and forth on certain things. I love the word Victorian. That's, if I've gotten anything out of this book, is I'm now overusing the word Victorian over the last 18 hours. Yes. No, because my image of, I remember, going to some sort of party at your house as a kid, and all the old Irish ladies were in the front room of your house to the left. When you go in the door to the left, and whatever furniture or lamps or whatever the decor is, I'm like, that's a Victorian scene. That's Irish Victorian for me.
There's some Irish lace on every cover.
Yeah, there were doilies. Were there doilies? There were doilies.
There were doilies. Those were grandmas.
Okay, yeah, there were doilies in that damn house.
And doilies meant a lot because you were either shanty Irish or you were lace curtain Irish. So having lace doilies in an Irish household meant something.
Maybe that's what I would describe my family. And honestly, this also sums up a little bit of my Italian heritage too, of they were trying to be, we were shanty people trying to be laced people.
Yeah, that was exactly it. That was our whole family.
And I am a little bit of that too, in that my nephews are using Long Island grammar. My nickname in college was Long Island White Trash a little bit, and that actually bothered me a bit because I'm like, you know what? I'm trying to. My mother has a doctorate, which was an expression used in the house at times. I'm going to college, and you're calling me Long Island White Trash, and I've worked so hard on beating the trashy accent out of me, and you give me an hour with 3 Italian immigrants, and it all comes out. I sound like Rocky after 15 minutes. So going through the book here, going through the letters, LGB. This is where I think it gets complicated. The B, I think, gets complicated. And listen, I believe in going forward with love.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah, I understand why people are afraid of the change. I understand why people, even just in a functional society, once we go further down this list, it's, how do you... it was just easier with 2 genders and we all bang girls for just the sake of my brain and trying to say the right thing. We agree with that? Is that a fair?
It's easier for the people for whom it worked. I think the fewer categories you have, the easier it is for the people in those categories. And the harder it is for the people outside those categories. If you only have one acceptable category, everybody in that, real easy. You're all in the same group. It's very easy, no distinctions. Everyone outside of that, real hard.
Yeah.
The more acceptable categories you have, the fewer people who are outside entirely.
So I have a friend who I once was anti-gay marriage, for the sake of, and from the generation of it's none of my business, which was a form of love.
Yeah.
In my mind.
In some cases. Also, sometimes not.
Was it? No?
I think there are definitely people who used it's none of my business as a way of shutting down conversation. Do you know, like, I don't want to hear about it. It's none of my business. And that's different from, it's none of my business. Do what you like. Do you know, like, you can use it either way.
Okay, and I have no problems with either of what you just presented in that if you can't handle it and you know you're going to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were saying about another friend in politics. If you know I'm gay and you can't handle it and you're going to tell me I'm going to hell, I'd rather you say it's none of my business, I think.
I think so too, but I think in either case that limits the amount of relationship we can have.
Gotcha, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Or not okay with that, but I accept that point.
Yeah, that's their point of view, that's what it is, but it does mean like, oh, if someone, as opposed to the, it's none of my business, do what you want, that's a much more opening, you know, like kind, where it feels more like, oh, I just don't want to presume things, rather than, oh, I can't handle you, what you do is wrong. It's the same sentence, but used kind of differently.
Now, I'm going to proceed. You know I'm a good person, so what I'm about to say, clipped is going to sound like a dumb question.
I am unoffendable. There is nothing you can ask me that someone hasn't asked before.
Yeah, but I'm saying that more for our friends at home. This next sentence is going to sound stupid. I'm reading the Bible for the first time ever.
Nice.
Or I've read, and I really never thought the anti-gay shit was in the gospel until I just read it lately. And I mean, there's just one paragraph where I'm like, wow, Jesus, that's hard. You know?
Wait. Okay, we got to talk about a couple things. Oh, wait, you finish your story.
Well, I'll finish the story in that whatever it is, we have Christian friends, family around the world who think it's anything outside of heteronormative is a sin.
Yeah.
And I remember getting a friend of mine to embrace gay marriage to a certain degree, where I'm like, hey, Bob over there is gay. Don't you want to know that Bob's living in a good life and has someone who cares about him? All right, well, maybe just Bob. All right, well, what about Joe down the block? Joe doesn't want to tell you he's gay because he's afraid of you saying the wrong thing. Don't you want to know? Oh, okay, fine, maybe Joe. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, then don't you want them to be happy? Yeah. Don't you want them to find love? Yeah. So you like gay marriage. and the person accepted that. But the counterpoint was for old-fashioned people, and I get it to some degree, well, what's next? Mm-hmm. And like, I believe in trans rights, but I don't know if I believe in I am curious to see what we say about medication 30 years from now. So I don't sound transphobic, but I think there will be revelations where we're going to say certain things were good, certain things weren't. Do you give a kid medicine at age 5, or do you give them it at 18, or do you do it not at all and you just deal with whatever you're feeling in your heart? All I know is I'm a comedian who tells fart jokes for a living. I just know that the opinion will change. I think the word they will not be a thing in 15 years. I just got to feel.
I think they is going to stay.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think all the other neo-pronouns are a little hard for people. Nobody's going to be using Z or any of those other.
Okay, well, now hang on. But using now, the argument was, well, what's next? Fine. I accept they, but now I want Z. Now I want
Z's the one they tried in the 90s. It never took off. That's why I think they is going to work out, because it is taking off.
Well, they is also, I don't love they. Making it about me, but it is like the royal we.
Yeah.
Which I love the royal we. I love the royal we. So why not a royal they? I've been writing with they. I write for Elvis Duran, and one of the things I've openly gay radio host for those of you who are new to the podcast, and
a wonderful host on Z100, really great.
Yeah, but I've been using the word because he was so open. My writing became so open, or not open, but inclusive is a better word.
Yeah.
Because he was so open, my writing was inclusive in that. I try not to just write, like, radio is the dumbest form of entertainment, where it's like, got Battle of the Sexes. Like, there's still a few shows doing Battles of the Sexes, and I'm like, that makes me cringe nowadays. Yeah. But where I'm a unrecognized pioneer, you're welcome, America. Was like, I would like to say, significant other I would use instead, because also too, it's not just gay, straight, or thruples or whatever. It's also, hey, are you actually married to that person? Is it a long-term relationship?
And language changes all the time. We're constantly, like, how often do you see bastard being used officially? Not much anymore, but you look on old birth certificates, bastard is stamped right there.
Listen, the word bastard with an Irish accent, no funnier word. No funnier word. I apologize. And for all the people born without married parents, I'm sorry, but that goddamn bastard just sounds great.
It's a great term.
But it's the interesting thing of, yeah, I guess that is the argument, which I don't disagree with, which is what's next then goes into scary things for you, but then it gets into the scary things of what are we teaching in the school? Like,
where I would take it if someone makes that argument with you is this. What I always say is, I'm not interested in the particulars of what's next, what new identity, what new term, what new pronoun, we don't know. We can't predict. None of us can see the future, right?
Right.
What I want to base things on is like, what should we be allowed to do? Not, is this specific identity something that's covered in the Bible acceptably, but rather, are we hurting anyone? Are we letting people be themselves? Am I attempting to control someone that I don't actually know a lot about or have any connection to? Like, you brought up the Bible and those parts in the Bible. I don't know what part you were particularly reading.
It was it's got to be Matthew, Mark. It's in so I read John, Matthew, Mark. So I think it was in Mark.
Okay. There's not a lot in the Bible about gay people.
Not
very, very little. And what is there is often included with lists of other things that people just straight up ignore. So when you look at Leviticus, which says a man shall not lie with a man as with a woman, it also says a man shall not wear clothes of two fibers. And that's listed in the same list of abominations. And so what I always say to people is, if you want to judge me by Ecclesiastes or Leviticus, and then you judge yourself the same way and everyone else? Sure. If you're going to tell me that everyone wearing a poly blend is going to the same hell I'm going to, we are on the same team.
And this is just me wallowing in a different form of ignorance. My Christian ignorance, I never knew that was in the gospel.
Yeah,
that part freaked, and it was just a paragraph, and I don't want to wallow in it.
No, because I think it is important, and this is something people think about. But we don't listen to the word of the Bible as literal truth anymore. Most of us, some people do. And if you are one person who's going to listen to the entire Bible, I'm an a la carte Christian, very much so. Exactly. As soon as you're an a la carte Christian, then I no longer care, frankly, because you are now picking and choosing, and that's not the word of God. That's your choice.
Well, I'm picking the love. Which is but going down the line of what's next.
Yeah. But again, so I go back to this. Yeah. We don't know, and we can't know. And what I would reiterate is what's next should be judged by the same system now is judged by. Well, love, care, control of the self.
So true story, the day I got a person to accept gay marriage, you came out as being in a throuple. Literally, like within the week. And I did not, the only thing you've ever written that I didn't love was, I think I've read 2 of your pieces on thruples. The New York Times one I hated, but I understand the emotion behind it. My one sentence blurb of the Times one was, "I'm in a throuple. I'm tired of your dumbass questions. Leave me the fuck alone."
That was the Guardian one, and I hated the headline. I agree, that headline was a bad headline.
Okay. But I love, like, whatever you have on your website, which I think was a Vice article, is a must read for people who don't understand thruples. And we're going to close eventually. This is going to be my this is just my longest podcast ever. But it's a useful one for anybody still here.
It's impossible to shut me up. I apologize.
No. I'm loving this because I've wanted to do this for years. Because on the what's next line is, fine, Hugh comes out as being in a throuple. I had trouble with that at first. Or not that you needed to know I was 100 miles away, hadn't seen you in 5 years and thinking about it. But I'm like, wait, this is a guy I like. He's doing it with love. They're committed. How is this different than any other divorced couple where the first husband is still paying alimony? I don't need to know what's going on in the bedroom, though I do have fun questions for off air. But all those jokes, dumb jokes aside, I'm like, you know what? It's a functional group of 3 people taking care of each other, and it's beautiful.
And I always tell people, it's like hilarious. We are the most like boring old married throuple you can imagine. We've been together for 15 years now. Tim and Jason, my partners, were together for 10 years before that. We own property together. We have 3 cats. We are very boring.
I would love to do a whole special on thruples. In fact, if I were smart, I would have focused just on that. No,
I'll come back.
No, for content, for content, I should have done. But the line of what's next, fine, I'm okay with thruples, or at least your kind of throuple. Yeah. Then you get into, well, what if it's a man and 2 women like the Mormons? Didn't we just undo the old Mormon thing where those relationships were sexist? And we could,
Are marriages not sexist?
They were until my father married my mother. No, but and I will.
I'm just saying, if we're gonna say that polyamorous Mormon relationships are sexist, then we actually have to say that pretty much all marriages.
Okay,
in America
but
are.
hang on. I will argue up until the year 1960 or 70, when definitely your parents strike me as using the old-fashioned sexist phrase of my mom wears most of the pants in the family.
Mm-hmm.
I bet your mom does too, with your joke about your dad being in the other room.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
She also does most of the cooking, though, and manages most of the household, which I think is still true for most women in America.
So the relation, though, my pop manages the house.
Yeah.
I don't know if he brags about it, or he actually no. My father is a manly house manager. My dad is a manly feminist. My dad will use the old 1950s jokes, but he lives a very ideal. He paid for my mother to get her doctorate. Now, some of these he was at one point the breadwinner,
right?
And he still always won enough bread to pay the bills. But no, Dad does the laundry. Dad cooks. My mother thinks she cooks. But lasagna once a week or every 3 weeks isn't necessarily, she's the better cook, so I think she's fine with that. But I'll argue that marriage was evolving into a less sexist relationship. Fair?
I would hope so.
But going to the line of Mormonism or my line and we do, I should keep this at an hour. But I have poly. I have a friend who came out as poly, and I'm like, are you poly or a douche?
Yeah. I mean, both are totally possible. I have definitely met people who are both of those things, But the douche thing, you can be anyone and be a douche. Like, I don't want to go out there and be like, oh, every poly relationship is great. No, there are tons of jerks out in every kind of relationship. I just think when it comes
So do you think poly is a thing? Okay,
I think it's a labeling of a thing that's probably been happening for years.
Should we be doing? Yeah, it is. It's a labeling of a thing. Should we be labeling it though?
I don't have a problem with it if people want. I think we often need labels to talk about things, right? You can't really discuss something until you got a word for it. And I think that we develop words for things as they become more common and more acceptable. We see this with gay stuff all the time, right? We go from homosexual, this really sciencey word, to gay, which is a little bit fun. And at first it's an insult, but then it becomes accepted. And we see this with language all the time. So maybe that'll happen with poly. Maybe 30 years from now, it's going to be super common. Yeah. Or maybe poly is going to be one of those words.
Well, are we going to add the word P before the plus?
I don't think so, because poly to me isn't necessarily queer. You could be in a straight.
Okay, that's where I was going. Is poly queer?
I don't think so. I mean, I think maybe, and this is debatable. I am not. I'm not the expert or in charge. I don't get to admit people to the club or not. But I think you can be queer and be poly, and I think you can be straight and be poly.
No, but it's funny. You are not, and this is what you are not letting people into the club, but I do feel like you have had a sense of who will be in the club before it was cool.
I'm definitely yelling for people to come, but I'm not letting them in or out. It's I'm very excited about it, but I don't necessarily need to make that decision for other people.
Yeah, I don't think you are the bouncer, but I think you are there accepting money for the tickets.
Yeah, I'd like to be the door guy.
You're the door. You're behind the glass wall. Here's your change, sir. Come on in.
But in an interesting outfit. I don't want to be the bouncer who has to wear all black and look boring.
Okay. I'm going to tell, we're going to end the podcast and I'm just going to have you back.
All right.
Okay.
I'm down.
The legend of you coming out as being in a throuple is you have an apartment in Harlem. Your family knows you have one boyfriend, but not a husband at this point. Okay. They know that you have a roommate. It is Easter Sunday. Again, this is the legend.
I'm so excited to hear this
This is the
story.
legend and telephone game.
Yeah.
It is Easter Sunday or some form of high holiday where you invite everybody over and your mother's in the house and says, wait, 3 people live here and there's only 1 bed.
No, none of this is correct.
None of this is correct or true?
Yeah,
okay.
No.
The way I was told the story through people.
I can see how it got there, though. There are some pieces that actually connect. Do you want to hear?
Okay, but now I just want to finish the punchline, or I'm going to spell the punchline out in my head, is that I am picturing a beautiful liberal Irish woman in a room with only a queen-size bed and 1 alarm clock going, where is the second and third alarm clock? Where's the second and third bed? Who's sleeping on the sofa? I'm also transposing my mother and other women of that age into this story.
I see it.
And then somebody had to say, they're all married.
No, and I will say though, at that point we only had a full-size bed, not a queen. That was hard. The hardest thing about being in a throuple,
full is smaller than queen.
Yeah, the hardest thing about being in a throuple is having a small bed.
Dude, I dated a taller woman, a couple, or that's my type, but without getting into that, and the one that was most prominent in my life did not enjoy my queen bed and kept calling it a princess bed.
Yeah, the wrong size bed can ruin things.
But if you got 3 men onto a full-size bed?
We all had to turn over at the same time if we turned over. If you ever go on a date with an adult who has just a twin bed, that's a sign that you need to run, I feel. A twin bed as an adult is a sign that you don't love yourself enough.
So that's another story, but I have thought on more than one occasion about downgrading my queen to a twin.
No, please do not do that to yourself. You deserve the full queen bed, even in a New York City apartment.
I deserve also an extra 3 feet for another desk and a dresser.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Wow.
You need
but then again, here you are, 3 men, 1 full-size bed.
We've grown to a king now. But so the real story of how I came out to my mother is actually really funny also, but totally different.
Totally different.
We had been dating, Tim, Jason, and I, for about a year. We had moved into that apartment in Manhattan together. They were my roommates in their mind.
So did you, we have to do a different throuple show, but keep going.
But my younger brother knew, because my younger brother is gay, you know Jim.
Yeah.
So Jim knew, he lives in Brooklyn too. And so I was like, Jim, I'm going to come out to mom and dad. You have to come up to Westchester. I'm going to do it tonight over dinner. You know, like I just need some, like, just in case it goes badly, which I didn't think it was. But just in case, you know, you want to be prepared. You want to have someone for them to talk to. It's like coming out etiquette. I've now come out a couple of times.
Wait, you have to wait when you come out. And by the way, you just keep coming out higher and higher.
Yeah. I'm like going on an extended difficulty.
But you feel for coming out, there should be food.
I just feel that there should be someone that you have prepped that you know that person can talk to. It's not always your job, but like I love my parents. If they had a hard time,
but there should be a third person in the room who could handle the counseling.
Yeah, or even if they're not in the room, who is prepared to talk late. You know, you want to prep.
But here's where I'm a fat ass. I was thinking of a coming out menu, and you're thinking about coming out counseling. That's why Hugh's a better human being than me.
But food helps too, because food keeps people calm.
Okay.
So we're in there, and I'm just like, we're just going to do this. Jim's in the room. So I tell them, I was like, you know, Tim and Jason, they're not my roommates. We've actually been together. And there's this sort of like long pause. And my mother says, do the 3 of you sleep in the same bed? And I said, yes. And then she thought for a little while longer. And she said, are all of you intimate at the same time? And I turned into a pile of ash, died, and then said, yes, but do you really want to ask any more questions like that? And my mother, you could see her thinking for a moment, wrestling with how much did she really want to know, though she was quite curious, and being like, no, I'm going to let that stream go. And then she thought for a moment longer, and she said, last question. You know this doesn't get you out of having grandchildren, right?
I remember that. And you know what's funny? I heard that line.
Yeah. That was it. Those are the 3 questions my mom wanted addressed. Once we got past that, everything was great. But we had already been through so many coming outs at that point, like so much. We'd gotten all of our fighting out of the way.
What were your other coming outs?
Well, when I first came out, I came out as bisexual, and then I came out as gay. And then there was a long period for me in the late 90s and early 2000s where I was really trying to figure out my gender. I was really like, non-binary did not exist, but I was not particularly comfortable. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, we're at 30. Let's end on that. Listen, so Hugh, your family, even though I've only met you 20 times in my life, and I love you for being a friend for this. I think this was a good conversation. The book, Friends and Neighbors, is When Brooklyn Was Queer. Big things are, can I say that much?
Yes.
Big things. Big things are coming. So get on board now. Buy the book. I would tell you to follow him on Instagram, but I'm not even sure if he has the password.
Yes.
All right. And quick coming. Did I just say quick coming out? No. Quick magic mirror. I always try to name one listener or two. I'm going to do a second magic mirror later, but Bobby Scott, if you're listening, I see you. And if you can, folks, not only buy When Brooklyn Was Queer, but just share. Listen, the way this podcast gets traffic is you sending it to a friend. And I know this one has to be good for someone. Until next time, guys, good night, New York, or good night, Brooklyn.
And Tommy, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. Like,
I should have let you do the goodbye. Yeah,
so open and so wonderful.
Was
like,
it? I've wanted to do this for years.
Yeah, I mean, you're just great. I mean, that's the thing that I think makes you as a person really wonderful is how open and welcoming, inviting, fun, funny, not scared. You ask difficult questions in fun ways. You admit what you don't know. You make it enjoyable. And I think for all of you who are listening, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, you need to keep listening. And you should also be going to see him because he is a wonderful person. It's like I have to do a lot of these conversations.
Yeah.
You know? It's my life. Being an author, you got to promote your books. You got to do this. And a lot of times it can be weird.
Actually, has it been?
Oh, yeah. People have asked me rude questions.
So you just, because
mean.
you said one thing, and I'll, again, some of this will have to be on our next podcast in a few months. Listen, I know for sure I have one friend, Justin Lewis. I forget exactly what I said and how I did it, but I know he came out my year after college, but I'm visiting him when he was a junior or senior. And everyone's like, Tom, Justin is gay now. And I remember writing on the board, he was a good looking guy, still is. And I'm like, everyone's telling me you're gay now. And whatever I wrote, I think it was it's a waste. I felt whatever it was, I felt it was complimentary-ish. Mm-hmm. And whatever it was, it really hurt his feelings. Yeah, and but he was very good about letting people ask dumb questions for years. And again, 1990s.
Yeah. Also, I think being a good person doesn't stop you from doing something stupid occasionally. Like, no offense. I do lots of stupid things.
If you don't know.
Or even when you do, I do shitty things sometimes. I think people, especially these days in like social media gotcha land, want to find the evidence that you have once said something wrong and now you are a pariah, you know? And for me, I'm sort of like, what's the intent?
I'll say this. I'll take both sides of a conversation, and I'm saying this from a mountain of white privilege.
Okay.
No, white, heterosexual, normative, whatever privilege, in that I have a friend. I always tell this story. My friend Father Lou, and I'm going to tell this story again on our shorter podcast. It's a waste to do it this far in. But my friend Father Lou loved gay people, and in the 1990s, there was an incident with gay people on campus, and he made gay people feel loved at church. Mm-hmm. But it was also God didn't want you to do anything with it, which frankly, I get for all forms of sexuality. If you look at it, a man fucking a woman is original sin. They teach you that in confirmation class. I actually get that thought. I think that thought is useful for other political things later. But Lou had a friend, Chris Dawson. And Chris Dawson was openly gay, and it was, hey, I love you. And Father Lou went to, when Chris Dawson's dad died, Father Lou went up to do the Catholic Church in Canada. And then eventually Chris Dawson comes out, and it's okay, God loves you, but maybe you shouldn't. And probably said something similar to what I said to this kid, Justin Lewis. You're fucking hot. Though he didn't say it like that. Why don't you go bang some girls? You're good looking. It's a waste. And it helped that Chris was an athletic, manly man, gay man. And eventually Chris meets a guy and says, Father, would you do the marriage? No. And in this in-between time, after I went to college, Lou was probably doing a lot of homilies of gay men should not be allowed to have kids, which was the zeitgeist of the early 2000s. It might have even have been my opinion had I not worked at Rosie O'Donnell and met a woman, and not even Rosie. Rosie was a showbiz mom. Yeah. I mean, a loving mom, but a showbiz mom. I wasn't tight with her. Right. My friend Joy Trapani adopted her first baby. Isabella, I think, was the baby's name. And I just promise you, where no child is more loved than Isabella Trapani, or whatever the hell last name they picked. Speed through the story back to Father Lou. Father Lou was asked to conduct the marriage. He says, no way. Catholic, that's wrong. It was, well, why don't you come? No way. I don't want to get in trouble for this being seen as I'm supporting it. But Lou at one point before that, without Chris Dawson being there or me being there, was doing a lot of anti-gay marriage homilies. Mm-hmm. God loves you, but no. And if it weren't for this kid, Chris Dawson, gently sharing his life, and one day, Chris Dawson in the year, let's make it 2013, shows up at Father Lou's house with his also equally traditionally manly husband. Okay. I mean, they're triathlon gay.
Yeah.
triathlon gay, and their son. And Lou just goes, these are manly men. These are manly men. They have to be able to have children. They have to have a family. They're manly men. And Lou spent the rest of his life tracking down. And in that moment, he goes, gay marriage, it's great. It's the new Pepsi. And someone says, Lou, you scared a lot of gay men away from the church. Yeah. People were telling him that. And Lou went on a mission to track down and apologize to as many gay men as he could, to the point where he was having me get numbers, and it was incredibly awkward. And I'm like, Lou, that guy's straight. Lou, that guy's got a wife. No,
I think so.
And a few of the men accepted the apology, and a few didn't. And Lou's last voicemail, which I'll play either on this podcast or another, I thought was a statement about accepting love in as many forms as he knew about up until the year 2015. I don't know if he. I don't think he would have been there for trans. Or I don't know. He would have been there for 2015. Yep. And it was because of, quite frankly, and bringing it back to you, I think it has to be hard on the other side accepting the dumb questions. I think it has to be hard accepting the dumb question when the intent is wrong. Yep. Because quite frankly, and I just read a list of words to say to sound dumber, and quite frankly is on the list. But if I did not have people being patient with me when I was frankly being an asshole, I don't know, more than once and not growing immediately.
We all need that, though.
Well,
we all need on everything
that's
on Earth.
gone nowadays, and that's what I love about you.
But here's what I'll say. I don't think it is gone. I think the bar has changed. What in the 90s would have been normative, not particularly asshole-ish, is now something that is really asshole-ish because you haven't changed with the time. I think there are still lots and lots of possibilities out there. They've just changed what they are and what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And my point is always this. That's always changing. It's never going to stop. We are never going to reach a moment in time where we're like, everything that is acceptable has been defined as acceptable. Everything we are now is what we are forever. It will always change. And so I'm just... Hopefully, again, we're all changing, so who knows? But I just would like to try to remain in a place of asking myself, like, who is hurt by this? If anyone is hurt, why are they hurt? What is the nature of the hurt? And my job, if I'm going to be a historian, if I'm going to write these books, if I'm going to say that what I want to do is understand the moment we're in better, that's what all my work is about, I've got to be able to field these questions. I just do. It's my work. It's what I want to do. I want people to ask me these things. And so I've got to be open to even the most difficult questions, even the ones, not you, but there have been times where I think, oh my God, this is the dumbest motherfucker on earth that I'm talking to. I am talking to someone whose IQ is in the fucking toilet, and it doesn't matter. It is still my job to listen to what they have said, meet them where they are, absolutely disagree with them. I don't need to give in to someone else's terrible ideas. But if I'm going to say I want to talk to people about this and that they should read my book and come talk to me, then I need to be open. I need to listen to what they said and disagree on their level. Not shut them down, not tell them they're a fucking moron. Even if I hate the question, even if I think that, I'm thinking that because I'm mad. I'm not thinking it's because it's true. The question might be dumb. It doesn't make them dumb. I've asked dumb questions. People have put up with me. This is my job. I have to do it.
All right. And thank you for coming to your distant cousin's apartment and letting him do that. Folks, I'm just hitting stop because I'm afraid this machine may not have recorded audio for 20 minutes, or there's always a fear that it doesn't record right now. So if I sound great, it was a great interview. Good night, New York.
Good night.